You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
You are listening to another awesome episode of Unpause Your Life. I am your host, Dr. Callie Estes of the Addictions Coach and the Addictions Academy. My guest today is very interesting and near and dear to my own heart for something I've always wanted to do. I'd like to introduce Phil Chalmers to you. He is an American true crime writer, homicide trainer, and television personality. He has appeared on the shows Killer Kids on A&E and Crime Watch Daily on Fox. He is the author of several books, including the landmark book on teen violence, Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer. He has interviewed over 200 teen killers, school shooters, mass murderers, and serial killers. His newest project is a book about serial killers and a Netflix documentary that is in the works right now. He will be interviewing serial killers face-to-face and gathering confessions and crime details never revealed before. It is his hope to close several murder cases around the country and bring closure to hurting families. Phil has seen a connection to drug and alcohol addiction in these murder cases, which has fired up his passion to help those addicted to drugs and alcohol. Born and raised on the streets of Cleveland, Ohio, by a violent alcoholic father, he understands what it's like to be raised in a dysfunction and abusive home. Welcome, Phil.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Well, that was a mouthful. Oh, my God, you've done so much. I don't even know where to start.
Fire away, man. It's been one hell of a ride, I'll tell you that.
All right, let's start with teen killers, because that seems to be a hot topic right now. We had Columbine, we've got the Parkland shooting. Tell me what you do in that realm and how this stuff is happening consistently.
Yeah, so I was raised in a home that's similar to these killers, like a very dysfunctional, violent, abusive home. Grew up in the hood of East Cleveland, Ohio. And first 10 years of my life, I spent in a crime-ridden neighborhood with a violent alcoholic father, completely addicted to alcohol, very violent. And so I had the same upbringing as a lot of the killers that I talked to today. And that's why I started going into this realm is I was going to go to college and be an accountant or something. I went to 2 years of college and I was like, man, this is not what I'm into. So I started working with violent offenders and I kind of felt like I related to them. I connected to them. So I started interviewing teen killers and school shooters in about 1985. And so from 85 to 2000, I interviewed hundreds of teen killers and school shooters, studied thousands of cases, and came up with a lot of information a lot of people were seeking.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So when it comes to interviewing these teen killers, what do you ask these kids? Like, you're sitting across from one of these kids that just shot up a school, killed 10 people. What do you say?
I usually start out by connecting with them, right? So it is basically sales in some way, counseling in some way. So I connect with them. I say, tell me about your family, your upbringing. And usually I can say I had a similar family. I had a similar upbringing. So I kind of walk them through an interview that I do all the time. It's just, tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about your parents. Tell me about your dad. I like to ask all the killers I talk to, even serial killers, when's the first time you thought about killing someone? Sometimes they'll say they were 5. Sometimes they were 10. Sometimes it was their stepmother, whatever. And then I kind of walk them through, and I came up with 13 causes of why kids kill, 20 warning signs we all need to be aware of to spot a killer, and 6 triggers that turns regular kids into killers. And so I ask them a lot about those questions. Did you use drugs, or did you abuse drugs? Were you molested? Were you bullied? I kind of walk them through my list, and it's amazing that there's so many similarities. That's why I've come up with kind of a way to spot a killer.
That's interesting. So give me an example. Who have you worked with recently as a teen killer that we would know?
Okay, I'm talking a lot right now to Andy Williams. So it's Charles Andy Williams. He's the Santee, California school shooter. And we've been talking a lot lately. He really wants to help other kids, and so he's been reaching out to me a lot. I talk a lot to Luke Woodham from Pearl, Mississippi. But I've interviewed almost every school shooter. Those are a couple guys I've been talking to recently. A lot of teen killers, like Joshua Cook murdered his parents in Virginia. He was a big fan of The Matrix. And he actually wore the same kind of clothes and used the same shotgun as The Matrix and shot both of his parents, blew them away in the house. He was a big video gamer and a big violent music fan as well. But, we see a connection. A lot of the culture and the media has a connection as well. My newest stuff is serial killers, and we'd be happy to talk about that later in the interview. But yeah, serial killers is what I've been nonstop talking to serial killers the last few months.
Well, that's my jam, right? Serial killers. That's what I wanted to do. I did my internship in a prison, and I got the ability to sit across from Heidnik, which I was fascinated with. And I wanted to be an FBI profiler, but, we're going back 23, 24 years. They didn't let women in the BSU. So wow. I'm living vicariously through you. So let's talk about serial killers. Tell me who you're working with. Tell me I know you have an art collection that rivals, the Van Goghs of the world.
So, I'll just kind of finish that. So I wrote a book. It came out. I watched the Columbine massacre in 1999 on TV, and I was like, damn, I got to do something about this. So I spent 10 years writing a book that came out in 2009. That's the book Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer. That's where I classified these kids and came up with the 6 types, the 13 causes, all the stuff that I use for homicide teams and police today. After I've done that for a while, I kind of felt like, the serial killer thing, nobody's done a lot with them lately. The last really big project was the Mindhunter show you see on Netflix, the early FBI profilers in the 70s and 80s. So I just started writing hundreds of serial killers, and they all wrote me back. And I started communicating with them and talking to them on the phone. I email them every morning, and it's amazing what we're doing. So, the big hitters, I got Christmas cards and letters from Charles Manson, son of Sam David Berkowitz, Dennis Rader BTK, the Hillside Strangler, the Gainesville Ripper, and on and on and on. So I'm talking to a lot of people that are kind of famous. Mm-hmm. I'm also talking to a lot of serial killers because most of them are unknown. So I would say I'm talking to right now 200 serial killers. And I get messages every day, people that you probably never heard of. Terry Blair from St. Louis, Anthony Sowell from Cleveland. These are guys that are kind of unknown, but we get a truck driver, John Williams, who said he killed 36 women and he's only convicted of 2. So yeah, we're going to get these serial killers that confess to a lot of unsolved murders. I'm also going to get serial killers who've never talked before, like the guy that killed Jeffrey Dahmer, Christopher Scarborough. He's going to talk on camera for the first time. If we land this Netflix show, which we're very close, it'll be the next big thing.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it, because a lot of the stuff that I watched, they did the Ted Bundy thing, I thought that was wasn't really, super, graphic and really into it. So I think that'll be really cool, because you're going to get people on TV talking about what they've actually done. Now, of all these guys you're talking to and working with, who do you think is the most psychologically sick, and why?
Generally, anybody that tortures their victims, anybody that has sex with the victim after death, to me are the worst. And, anybody who eats their victims, tortures their victims, or has sex with their corpses, to me is the worst. And so, unfortunately, I'm talking to a lot of people like that. There was a guy from Maryland that killed people, and he put their bodies, he had a hamburger stand, like a barbecue stand at the end of his driveway, and he would serve the remains in his barbecue stand with the meat he was serving and the hamburgers and stuff.
I remember him. I remember the barbecue guy.
That's pretty crazy. The guy that I just talked to, I just met with on death row last week in Indiana, William Clyde Gibson, loved to have sex with corpses. He would keep the bodies around for days, and he would love to cut the breast off and put them in his pocket. That's kind of weird. Anybody, lots and lots of guys, lots of serial killers keep the bodies around, have sex until they decay. Anthony Sowell, Harrison Graham, on and on and on. But the torturous guys too. I just interviewed Matthew Macon. He's a Lansing, Michigan serial killer. He sent me a confession. I can't really say a whole lot because it's going to be on Netflix, but I'll generalize it. He broke into a woman's house. He stuffed a rag in her mouth and put tape around so she couldn't scream. He made her take off all her clothes. He hooked something around her, a rope from the garage, and he hung her. And as she was kicking and screaming and hanging and dying, he made a sandwich and watched her. Very vicious. One of the bodies he threw I think it might have been her he threw in the freezer when he was done. No, he left her hanging for the police. Another woman he killed threw in the freezer. So she was alive. These guys they're vicious killers and very violent. And it's amazing that they're out there. And they look very normal. That's the scariest part about it, Kelly. These people look normal. They don't look like killers.
Yeah. So when you're working with these guys, what's the common denominator? Is it child abuse growing up? Is it child neglect? Because I know there's some serial killers that had normal upbringings and for all intents and purposes seemed, like the kid next door, like Bundy was, the normal kid, the all-American jock. No one suspected him to be a serial killer. And then here he is driving around his Volkswagen Beetle, with the doors locked.
Usually it's daddy issues or mommy issues. That's a big one. A big connection is, like Ted Bundy found out later in life that his grandfather was his grandfather was actually his father, something crazy like that. John Wayne Gacy's dad was abusive. Most of these killers either didn't have a dad or their father was abusive. And that's usually the teen killer connection, right? With the serial killers, it's a little bit of both. It's like they didn't have a dad or they had an abusive father. Then their mother was crazy too. Like she would dress a male up in dresses and stuff and send him to school. So abuse is a big one for serial killers. But like I said, there's also people like BTK, son of Sam, David Berkowitz, who had pretty normal childhoods. So it's not always, but that's a big connection. Drugs plays a role. Alcohol abuse plays a role. Drug addiction is a piece of the puzzle. Violent entertainment. A lot of these guys love violent torture, pornography and stuff. There's a lot of things. Ted Bundy, Ed Gein, and BTK were inspired by early detective magazines, which are basically pornography, torture pornography.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you differentiate between, let's say, a teen killer, which becomes a serial killer? Like how and why? Why are we seeing kids going in and, killing kids in other schools versus serial killing? Like what's the differentiation there?
So like there's different types of animals here, right? So you got a teen killer who kills somebody while they're a juvenile. That's one. That still shocks me when I see it. The youngest school shooter, 6 years old. That's incredible. 6-year-old boy in Flint, Michigan took a gun to school and opened fire and killed somebody. That's crazy, right? So the juvenile killers always fascinates me. Like you kill and you're 12, you're 14. That's crazy. Then you got the school shooters who are basically juveniles. They're mass murderers. They kill multiple people in one day, but they're juveniles. We call them school shooters.
Mm-hmm.
Adult mass murders are a little bit different. Like they're adults and they kill multiple people at one time. Usually it's different motivations. And then serial killers kill multiple people, 2 or more, with the cooling off period. So you have to kill someone, take a break, and then kill again. Sometimes they mix though. Like Jeffrey Dahmer started out as a teen killer. He was 17 years old. He lived near my house in Bath, Ohio. He wanted to kill a hitchhiker. He had a fantasy, and he went and picked up Stephen Hicks and murdered him, beat him with a dumbbell in his home in Bath, Ohio. I think he had sex with him, got him drunk, killed him, dismembered him, spread him all over the yard. He got away with that murder, moved to Milwaukee, and became a serial killer. But he started out as a teen thrill killer. Ironically, Christopher Scarver, who I talked to, beat him to death in a prison unit with a dumbbell. So his first murder, he killed a guy with a dumbbell. He was killed with a dumbbell. It's kind of like karma with Jeffrey Dahmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when that happened. When they arrested him, I said 2 weeks. He'll never make it past 2 weeks. Because there's a lot of people that, wanted him dead. And
a lot of serial killers will be asked to be put in a protective custody, a separate area. Like BTK is in a cell by himself. He would be dead right away. He would be dead immediately. But he's got some very violent guys on the area. He's not on death row. They don't have it in Kansas, but he's sitting in an area like death row, and he's by himself. Dahmer didn't care, and I think he kind of wanted to die.
Yeah.
Not only did he not only did he move around with general public, but he actually taunted other inmates. Like he would pretend he would pour ketchup on his French fries and pretend he's eating people. And that's why Scarver ended up killing him and another inmate. He killed 2 people that day.
Wow. Now, let me ask you this question. So you have a kid, teen killer, that decides they're going to go like Columbine. They're going to go in and they're going to shoot up the school.
Okay.
Versus pre-planning, premeditated serial killing. What's the difference between the emotional rush of going in and doing that versus like plotting and planning and killing somebody, hanging them from the rafters and having a sandwich and then planning another one? What's the difference?
Okay. Well, let's just compare school shooter to serial killer. School shooters are juveniles. Their brains aren't fully developed until they're 22 to 25. They're not really thinking of consequences. They might enjoy the killing act, but it's not like really important to them. What they're trying to do is get even and get some fame. And they know if they kill enough people, they'll get that. So think of Parkland, Florida. That kid knew if he killed enough people, he was going to be famous, and he is. But once it's over and the smoke clears and he ends up in a little prison cell there, he realizes, Nicholas Cruz now realizes, my life is over. I don't think Nicholas Cruz will survive. He may, but I think he's going to kill himself because he now realizes what he did. Where the serial killers are adults, their brains are fully developed, they're psychopaths, and they thoroughly enjoy the act of killing. So serial killers don't want to get caught. A lot of people think these serial killers want to brag about their murders. They don't. I promise you they don't. And that's the biggest misconception. If I hear anything, I say, they'll say to me, you're just giving them a platform to brag. Listen, man, it takes me 10 years to get some of these guys to talk to me. They don't want to brag. Some of them will flat out say, I don't want to talk about any of my murders. So most people, BTK is an exception, most people don't really want to talk about their crimes. They don't want to get caught. They don't want to be famous, and most of them are not famous. What they really want to do is keep killing people because they're addicted to it, like some people are addicted to drugs or pornography.
I was waiting for you to say that because there's such a difference between sociopathy and psychopathology. So people ask me all the time, like, what's the difference? And I always say, well, 1 in 5 is a sociopath, but psychopath is a whole nother level. That's serial killer level.
Yeah. Yeah, and the teen killers, the school shooters aren't really addicted to killing as much. Sometimes they kill just to feel what it feels like, but it's only going to be one murder. Very few of them go on to become Jeffrey Dahmer. There's a few who have killed as teens and have killed multiple bodies. So Craig Price, there's another name for you. Look him up. Craig Price is the youngest serial killer in modern American history. He killed his first victim at 13. His nickname is the Warwick Slasher. Killed his first neighbor victim, a female at 13, took a break, came back 2 years later, and he killed 3 more. So he killed 4 people by his 15th birthday.
Wow.
Slashed them to death. Violent serial killer. The kid was 13 and 15. That's pretty rare, but they do exist.
So let me ask this question. How many of these teen killers, these, school shooters, actually realize now the scope of what they've done?
That's the difference. If people ask me, what's the difference between teen killers, school shooters, and serial killers? The teen killers usually are remorseful. The school shooters are pretty much always remorseful. I've just been contacted by the defense team of Nicholas Cruz, and I'm probably going to be one of the only people to talk to him if it works out. And I'm going to know what he's going to tell me. He's remorseful. He doesn't feel good about what he did. He feels bad about what he did. So most of the teen killers and school shooters will talk to me. They'll want to help other people. They are remorseful. They feel terrible. Whereas serial killers love what they do. They're not remorseful at all. They can say they're remorseful, but they're not. I just interviewed a serial killer truck driver by the name of Delmas Colvin. He's from Toledo, Ohio. He says he killed 47 women. He's convicted of 3 or 4 or 5. And he said, I said, are you remorseful? And he laughed. Ha, 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 ha. He goes, nope. And that's pretty much the mindset of a psychopath. They're not, the only reason they're talking to me is we're working together. You know, I help them, they help me. That's how you deal with a psychopath.
Right.
They're not going to me for nothing.
Yeah, they're interested in what they can get out of it because
Exactly.
That's all.
Yeah.
You know, psychopaths generally don't care and they don't have any feelings for anything. They're basically adonia, which is stoic. So
Right.
it's, I'm going to do this because I can. I'm going to do this because they let me. And if you let them out of jail, they will continue to do whatever it is they're doing until they're actually stopped. So they're the ones that need to be behind bars because unless we, you know, remove them from society or basically, you know, kill them on death row, there's no stopping them versus the teen killer who comes in with a vengeance and then goes, oh, did I just do that? Now what?
Yeah, there's been several teen killers and school shooters. I would say hundreds and hundreds of them that have been released and have done well, and they've stayed out of trouble. I would never release a serial killer. I have a book coming out next Christmas called The 10 Myths of Serial Killers, and you want to really get into something crazy, let me talk about the myths. But one of the myths is that we can release serial killers, and there's a chapter in the book called Release to Kill Again. We've released 50 to 70 serial killers who have got out once and killed again. Some got out twice and killed again twice.
Yeah.
They will kill again. You don't release serial killers, and you don't release anybody that tortures their victims, has sex with their corpses, or eats them. You just don't release those people. And unfortunately, the way the laws are in some states and some countries and the deals that they got, some of these crazy people walk, and that's scary, man.
Yeah, that always baffles me. Like, even the Dahmer thing, when, you know, he had the kid in the street and the cops were there and the kid was saying, I don't know this man. And he said, oh, this is my nephew. And,
Right.
you know, they weren't even of the same race. And the cop let him have the kid and he ended up killing him and eating him later that day. Like, that's baffling to me. Like, how do you, you know, allow that kind of behavior to continue? And we had him and we let him go. So it's interesting. And then someone like Manson, who never really killed anybody, you know, with his own bare hands, was in prison his whole life because he was such a mastermind with control and the way he got away with things. So it's so interesting how our culture and our society and our penal system is kind of not really able to see the craziness of some of these crimes and make sure they are where they need to be.
It is, and there's no rhyme or reason to some of the punishments and some of the sentences some of these guys get. So, like, I know a guy, he just emailed me this morning. His name's Cedric Carter. He's on Ohio's death row, and he killed a convenience store clerk, raped and killed a convenience store clerk. Okay, so he killed one person. That's bad, right? He's on death row. He'll probably be executed. Yet BTK killed 10 people. Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17. And some people, like Carl Watts from Houston, killed 120 women, and they were all serving life sentences. So there's no standard punishment all across the country. Some states don't even have death row, yet others have been executed, you know?
Yeah.
People that are innocent have been executed. So there's really there needs to be a standardized, I mean, this would be a huge, you'd have to really work it, but there really needs to be a standardized sentencing nationwide because, you know, some of these serial killers they cut a deal. They get sentenced to 20 years, good behavior. They walk in 10 and they kill again. And somebody should be held responsible for that.
I agree. And you brought up BTK a couple times, and he's an interesting case from a psychology perspective, from my perspective, because he was so violent and so nasty and zero remorse. Just, this is what I did, this is how I did it, and I'll do it again. You know? Versus Dahmer, who was an emotional nightmare. Like, to me, BTK was so stoic, and Dahmer was like, you know, kind of like weak-minded, but at the same time, needed to be in control. So it's so different, like psychology-wise. When you're sitting across from these guys, what do you pick up and what do you see?
The one thing I'll tell you is they're very normal. And people think, oh my God, you're going to death row. Sometimes I get locked in their cells for these interviews. I just did that. When I go to Indiana, they lock me up in a cell with him with 2 doors locked behind me. I'm alone with him. I'm not worried though. These guys are very normal. They look normal and they actually act pretty normal. People think they're raving lunatics, drooling. It's not like that at all. The reason why these guys kill so many people is they're really never a suspect. Dude, BTK was a stellar pillar of the community. He killed a woman 6 doors down from his house and never was a suspect. That's insane. BTK, by the way, is the most fascinating case, in my opinion, of all serial killers, that he killed 10 people over the course of 31 years, stayed in the same neighborhood, taunted the police, took breaks from killing, which is really rare, raised a family, raised 2 kids. I mean, he was a church president, Boy Scout leader. He's a good guy. Except he had a little problem, like to torture women.
I watched his daughter talk about him. And it was so interesting because she said, I still don't know if I believe it, because he was such a good father and he was always there for me and he did everything right. So it's so hard for, because she said, I'm the daughter. Like, how do I wrap my head around my dad as a serial killer when I don't have that frame of reference? I don't have that experience with him. He was normal, which I think is really interesting because, these are the guys that it's like it was a hunting expedition, They would have a wife, they would have kids, they would be the family man, and they might disappear for a few hours during the night, go somewhere, come home, no one knows what they were doing.
I mean, a lot of these guys, John Wayne Gacy ran a contracting company and he was in politics and met the president's wife. I mean, Ted Bundy was in politics and people loved him. So it's weird. They can compartmentalize this and live a normal life on one hand. On the other hand, they're complete monsters. I mean, they are the boogeyman.
Yeah.
And so that, one of the goals of doing this Netflix show is there's multiple goals. I want people to see these people for what they really look like because they look super normal. And we want to solve cold cases, and we're going to have people talk on camera about crimes that nobody's ever talked about. So a lot of things are going on with that. And I think that's why I'm doing this book, The 10 Myths of Serial Killers. Everything's changed about serial killers. So, what you think serial killers are is not who they are. Like, for example, most people think serial killers are crazy white guys, right? And if I ask people when I go to my classes, I train my homicide classes, I ask them to name a serial killer, and they name Gacy, Bundy, Dahmer, BTK, Ed Gein, and maybe Richard Ramirez. And then I say, name a black serial killer, and they usually stare at me. And sometimes they say the DC snipers, and that's it. But 60% of serial killers are black and 31% are white over the last 20 years. So the new profile of a serial killer is a black male who likes to shoot people with a gun, and their victims are multiple races. So the old myth is white serial killers kill white victims, black serial killers kill black victims. That's changed. White serial killers still kill white victims, but black serial killers kill anyone, everyone. So this is all kind of changing, and it's important for me to train law enforcement because they're hunting these monsters, and most of them are hunting white males and missing. There's 1,000 black serial killers in my new book. They killed forever because nobody suspected them.
Yeah, I saw that and I've noticed that. And it's like the media wants us to see, here's this white serial killer, but there's all this other stuff going on. And if you watch Snapped or you watched any of these death row stories, you can see it. And you can see the different personalities and you can see how they landed there. I do want to bring up one because I want your opinion on it. The guy that shot up the Aurora, Colorado movie theater.
Yes.
With the red hair.
Yes.
He fascinates me because he's mental health. Like, he's not just a shooter. Like, you can see from his photos, there is something going on behind the curtain. And my question always is, how do people miss this? So he's got a touch of something. I don't know if it's bipolar, schizophrenia. There's something not right there. Yet all the people around him never really saw an issue. And I want to talk about him, and then I want to ask you this question. How many of these kids are on big pharma medication? Such as Wellbutrin, Seroquel, Prozac? Because I've seen a lot of these kids are on this stuff when they commit the shooting or commit the murder versus a serial killer that's not on any of this stuff? So two separate questions for you.
Right. Well, yes. Well, James Holmes is definitely mentally ill. He's got all kinds of problems. A lot of these adult mass murderers are mentally ill, on medication, on drugs. A lot of the school shooters are on drugs, medications, prescribed medications. Yeah, most school shooters are on medication, but they've got a lot going on. They're being bullied, and they're young. They're into violent entertainment. They like worship, violent video games and all this stuff, and they're surrounded with violence. They start to love violence, and it's kind of a natural carryover that they decide they want to die eventually, and then they decide this is how I'm going to do it. Where the mass murderers, the adult mass murderers like James Holmes and all the the church shootings in the Colorado and all that stuff, they're usually mentally ill or schizophrenic, bipolar. They're on medication. Yes, that's definitely a big component. Whereas the serial killers are a lot more calm. It's almost like the school shooters. The serial killers are a lot more calm. Usually they're not on prescribed meds. They will be taking illegal drugs, and they'll use drugs to lure their victims. And so that's why I'm passionate about the industry you're in, the addiction and the rehabilitation and the treatment, because there's a lot of people being killed today and tomorrow and the next day because they're addicted to drugs, and they do things and they put themselves in positions they would normally not do if they were sober, and they're easy prey. And that's really sad.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because with HIPAA, I can't tell you who I've worked with, but I can tell you that I have worked with a few killers, shooters, school shooters, and also serial killers. And the drug and alcohol component, it seems to be certain types of drugs, and it seems to be certain situations that kick it off. I'll give you an example. I have a gentleman that had a bar fight. And he was on a couple different big pharma medications, nothing illegal, but, all the stuff you get for depression and whatnot. And he mixed it with alcohol, and he had a period of probably 4 hours where he blacked out, and he ended up in a jail cell covered in blood. Doesn't have any recollection of anything that happened until he saw the news on what he did. And he was horrified. And he said, I wasn't that person. I don't know what happened. So and I'm on the defense side, part of the defense was going back and looking at body chemistry and reading some of these bottles that says don't mix this with alcohol and don't do this and don't do that. And we were able to determine that the cocktail between the alcohol and the big pharma medication, the way it made him black out and cause violence was a predecessor for what happened. But he had never been violent, never had so much as a parking ticket. And it was all of a sudden he killed somebody. And he doesn't even know how it happened. So I definitely think drugs and alcohol are a big part of this, but not to mention, just those. You also have like the LSDs, and you have the Flocka, and you have the bath salts. We had the guy that ate the guy's face off down here and almost killed him.
Yeah.
So it's
you got, with the drug culture, we have actually seen the creation of a new type of serial killer, which is it'll be the black male. Using drugs, crack, meth, heroin, whatever, messing with prostitutes, picking up prostitutes, using drugs to lure them, and killing them. You got to think, Callie, we have 12 to 16,000 murders in this country a year, and at least 4,000 go unsolved every year. So over the last 10 years, I want to know, where are these 40,000 people?
Right. Yeah,
I'm starting to find them in these interviews. They're all over the country. A lot of these truck drivers a lot of these serial killers are truck drivers. Talk about an ultimate job. You pick up a prostitute at a truck stop, a lot lizard in Illinois, and once you get her in your truck, it's a mobile crime scene, and you rape her and you kill her and you take her clothes off. That's what the one guy said he did. And he would dump her body. He'd pull off the freeway. He would drag it in the woods. There goes, you're never going to find that body off I-80. And then he dumps the clothes in a dumpster, and it's a mobile crime scene, and the body, he cuts off the heads, and you'll never identify them. And that's what's going on now, where you have all these people disappearing, and a lot of people think it's sex trafficking, but a lot of it's serial killers. Yeah.
Have you worked with any women serial killers? Have you worked with Arlene Wuornos or anything?
I know of her. I did not. I didn't really get to talk to her. I haven't, and I don't know why I haven't. I've communicated with a few. The one lady that worked with the toy box killer, if you ever want to see a crazy case, there's a case that's called the toy box killer, and it's in New Mexico. He had this metal box in his backyard, and he had it set up like a torture chamber. And she would help him kidnap young ladies, and he would, torture them for days and then kill them. Talked to her, and I've talked to a few of these kind of women, but just not a lot. I don't know why I haven't. There isn't a lot to go with. There's only about 7% of serial killers are female, so we've got about 140 total in history. Eileen Wuornos is the most popular, the most famous, or the most well known, but a lot of them kill their spouses, they kill their children, they kill, their husbands or whatever. And I don't know, I guess I'm just not as interested with that. I mean, it's amazing when you kill someone that you're not connected with. That's, to me, is fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So for our listeners, if they have a teenager at home or a spouse, what would some signs be to look for that
Sure.
their child may be heading down this path, to ward it off before we get there?
Okay. So teen killers and school shooters, in my research, there's 13 causes, 20 warning signs, 6 triggers. Some of the top causes: unstable home, being bullied at school, addicted to drugs and alcohol, fascination with violence of any kind, including video games, pornography, fascination with deadly weapons like guns, bombs, and knives, involvement in gangs and cults. There's about 13 of those. The need to be famous, and no father, and these are the kind of causes. Then you go into warning signs. Younger kids would be a cruelty to animals, wetting the bed until their adolescent years, fire starting, those are early, peeping Tom, threats of murder. Again, warning signs. Seeing someone's fascinated with violence and they play their video games 15 hours a day. Nicholas Cruz played violent video games 15 hours a day. Serial killers will be fascinated with violent pornography, like early detective magazines and any kind of torture porn. They'll love that. Serial killers love to go in peeping Tom. They'll have pictures of women, tons of pictures of women in there. You'll find this stash if you're married to a serial killer. They'll spend a lot of time on their own. Serial killers will like to go out and do peeping Tom and stalk people, pick up prostitutes and all that. Triggers: if you have a kid who's got causes and warning signs, you're trying to get them treatment, you're trying to get them help. And I do a lot of that. I assist a lot of people with that. The number one trigger of a teen killer school shooter is when their girlfriend dumps them, for males.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Number one trigger for female teen killers is when her parents tell her she can't date someone.
Correct.
These are your top 2 triggers. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so interesting. This is just my question. How did Nicholas Cruz's parents not know he was playing video games 15 hours a day? Like, where was the parenting?
So Nicholas Cruz, his parents are both gone. So he had adopted parents. They both died. So he was just staying with a friend.
Wow.
Stayed with a friend. So he wasn't really not supervised. He was like 18 years old or whatever. So he was buying guns and keeping them in his bedroom. He was playing video games 15 hours a day. He would work a little bit of a measly job and, whatever. But yeah, so he just didn't have any supervision. He got expelled from school from posting things on social media with guns and knives. The kind of stuff I say is a warning sign. Anytime a kid posts a picture of a gun or a knife, that's a warning sign. A fascination with, he had, no family, no parents, loved violence, violent video games, loved guns, threatened to kill people, posted things like, I'm going to be the next famous school shooter. Those are warning signs. He got expelled from school. He waited a year, smart kid, waited a year, came back a year later, and attacked the school when they weren't really ready. And I do the part breakdown in my training today, all the mistakes they made. There's been a ton of mistakes. So
right.
It was the perfect storm. He hit the school at a perfect time. They weren't ready for him.
So I look at that from a psychology standpoint and say we have a broken system. So the parents aren't in the picture. The adoptive parents aren't in the picture. The kid's got no supervision. He's got no mentors. He's got no handler, nothing. And going the wrong direction fast, we should have a system set up for kids like him to access services for free. that he can have these people, big brothers, big sisters. He has some form of adult supervision and help. And then if he's posting this stuff online, the school's response is, let's just kick him out. Well, that doesn't solve anything. Kicking him out just deals with the problem today. It doesn't deal with the problem long term. So again, the system failed the child. We don't have the services available to make sure this doesn't happen. And somebody should have been giving him counseling and therapy and whatnot, and we could have prevented this. And then my big question is, why do we not have metal detectors in these schools? If you go into the hood, and I'm a hood rat, so if you go into the hood, you have schools that have metal detectors in every school. But these cushy, all-American, white schools, put it that way, non-political, have no metal detector. I want to know why. Why can't we just put metal detectors in? That would solve half the problem right there.
Mental illness is a big problem, and you hit it on the head. I mean, we don't do enough for kids who are mentally ill, mentally disturbed. We Baker Act them, send them to the hospital for 3 days. That doesn't help anybody. What we really need to do is send them away to a behavioral center, where they can really get therapy for 7 months or 9 months or whatever. And there's a great one in Orlando that I recommend. It's right next to SeaWorld. It's a behavioral hospital where kids can go get locked in for 9 months and really get the help they need. That's what Nicholas Cruz needed. So we don't have that. Our system's broken with that.
Yeah.
And as far as school safety, I always ask people, they say, they'll say the president's not doing anything, or this person's not doing anything, the governor's not doing anything. I always ask people, what do you want them to do? I mean, murder's illegal. Schools are gun-free zones. They're doing everything they can do. The problem is every school really needs to look like an airport.
Yeah.
Okay? When I go to the airport, and you do too, and we check in, once I get past security, I'm not worried about being shot at the airport because I know it's secure. Our schools need to look like the airport, but that would cost trillions and trillions and trillions. So that's why we're going to continue to have, we had 10 school shootings last year. We'll continue to have about 10 school shootings a year. That's like collateral damage to the politicians because that's the best they can do with the system we have. If we want no school shootings, and if someone's, screaming on the street corner, we need to stop all school shootings, then your schools have to look like an airport. That's going to cost you a lot of money. Millions per school.
Well, maybe it's a direction we need to go instead of building a wall. Now I'm going to get politically shamed for that one, but it's just we continue to have this kind of stuff. And I was at Penn State in '96 when we had the school shooter. I don't know if you remember the girl that hid in front of Old Main with a rifle and just started picking students off. I was there for that. I was actually working in the prison and we had lockdown that day. But even then, it was like she's in the quad, so she's out in the open with this trench coat in September, October. You don't need a trench coat in September, October. It's not that cold. With a rifle with a scope picking off kids. And the question became, what do we do for safety? I mean, that was back then in '96. So here we are, how many years later, and we still have the same question. What do we do for safety? So we've really not done anything to make sure our students and our kids are safe. And I think
really what we need to do, Callie, is you take an airport. Let's say you're down by Miami. So you take like an airport down there, just any of the smaller airports, and you say, this is going to be this high school. This airport is going to be the high school, and the 5 or 6 or 10 surrounding counties are going to go to this school. So it's going to be, maybe you only go 4 days a week. It takes you 2 hours to get into the school building, just like the airport. And that's how it's going to have to be done. I think it'll come someday. What's going to happen, Callie, is there's going to be a major attack here where we have 200-300 kids killed.
Yeah.
That's coming. And once that happens, the people in the country are no longer going to sit back. They're going to say, okay, this is it. I mean, we're done with this now. Either we take all our kids out of school and homeschool them, or you do something. And that's what's going to have to be done.
Yeah. And that's a shame, but that's sort of how things work. You don't get the stop sign at the intersection until you have so many fatal accidents. And it's like, okay, we've lost 20 people now instead of 1. Let's put up stop sign.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we are out of time, so thank you so much for coming on. And give me your handles and your Amazon. How do people find you if they have questions or want to buy your book or want to watch your show?
So they can go to my website, philchalmers.com. It's Phil, Phil, Chalmers, Chalmers, philchalmers.com. And I'm on social media. I post a lot on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find me all either through my website, or you can just search my name on those 3 social platforms. I'm on there, and I want to thank you for what you do. I love what you do, and what you're doing plays a really key role in what I'm doing, and that is stopping violence and stopping these murders that really don't need to be committed, and really keeping people safe. It's all about one of the big pieces of the puzzle is conquering addiction and getting people to get their lives back on track so they don't put themselves in these compromising positions. So thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming on, and we'll put all your links up so everybody can reach out to you and grab a copy of the book.
Sure. Awesome. It'd be great.
Awesome, and you've been listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes, another great episode with Phil Chalmers. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I may be awake, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To believe. I took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from solid ground. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. trapped at the gates. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To